She didn't whisper it. She didn't even try to hide it. Get out of here. And when the terrace went quiet, she leaned in like she wanted everyone to hear the reason, like my existence was the stain on her perfect night. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just gave her that small, polite smile people mistake for surrender. Then I walked past the champagne and the country club lights, climbed into my old truck, and sat with my hands on the steering wheel until my heartbeat slowed. Some of you know that weight when you realize respect isn't something you can beg for. It's something you either receive or you stop paying for. I pulled out my phone and called the only person who'd answer me on a Saturday night. Richard, I said, watching the wedding glow in my rearview mirror, I need you to pull the notes. There was a pause. Frank, are you sure? I stared at the building where my son was still inside. Yeah, I said quietly. Make it official. And that's when I heard the number out loud. The first time Jessica looked at me like I didn't belong, she did it with a smile. The Riverside Country Club wasn't my idea. It wasn't even Kyle's. But Jessica had a way of getting what she wanted: soft voice, polished words, and a confidence that made people step aside. The place was all marble floors and glass chandeliers, the kind of room where you feel underdressed even in your best suit. I drove up in my 2019 Ford F-150, freshly washed, parked between cars that looked like they belonged on a brochure. I wore the same $300 suit I'd worn to Kyle's college graduation. It still fit, it was still clean, but in that lobby, it felt like a costume. Jessica's world gathered near the bar: attorneys, doctors, people who said the names of firms like they were family crests. My world sat closer to the windows, my brother still smelling faintly of paint, my neighbor Tony with grease under his nails no matter how hard he scrubbed. Two worlds. One wedding, one son in the middle. Kyle's mother passed when he was 16, so it was just me. I walked him down the aisle, and for a moment, just a moment, I let myself believe this could be simple. Then I saw Jessica's mother watching me the way people watch a cracked glass at an expensive restaurant, and I felt something shift. If you've ever been the before someone's trying to outrun, you may recognize that feeling. The first request wasn't cruel. That's what made it dangerous. Cocktail hour was loud enough to hide quiet conversations, laughter, clinking glasses, a string quartet trying to sound effortless. I'd just grabbed a beer when Mrs. Miller appeared beside me, smiling like she was about to ask for a favor. Frank, she said, could we speak privately? She guided me toward the coat check, where the noise softened and the air smelled faintly of perfume and money. Dr. Miller joined us, along with Jessica's brother David, the kind of guy who looks like he's never carried anything heavier than a laptop. Mrs. Miller's smile tightened. It's been a long day, she began. Careful, and we know you probably want to get home early. I blinked. Actually, I'm fine. I wouldn't miss Kyle's reception. They exchanged glances like I'd missed a cue. Dr. Miller cleared his throat. The evening portion is going to be quite formal. Toasts, dancing. Jessica's colleagues. Colleagues, I repeated. David stepped in, voice smooth. What they're trying to say is, you might be more comfortable leaving after dinner, before the networking. Networking, like Kyle's wedding had a business agenda. I kept my face neutral, because I'd learned a long time ago. People get bold when they think you're too simple to notice the insult. I think I'll stay, I said. This is my son's wedding. Their smiles didn't break, they just turned brittle. And that's when I realized. This wasn't about my comfort, it was about their image. They didn't call me a problem, yet only a difference. Dinner was plated like a magazine photo. The venue alone cost 15 grand, catering another 10, and the flowers Jessica insisted on, white roses, ran nearly 6,000. I knew the numbers because I was paying for half of it. I hadn't complained. Not once. Kyle deserved a good day. After his mom died, I'd spent years trying to make sure he still believed life could be generous. But generosity makes certain people careless. Across the room, I saw Mrs. Miller lean toward a table of Jessica's law school friends, whispering. Heads turned, eyes flicked to me, then away, like I was something embarrassing to look at too long. I caught fragments when servers passed blue collar, different background, transition. It was said the way people talk about neighborhoods you lock your car in. Kyle didn't notice. Or maybe he pretended not to. He was laughing with friends, shoulders lighter than I'd seen in months. That's the part that hurt, if I'm honest, not the judgment from strangers. I've had clients try to haggle my work down to the penny while driving cars worth my entire truck. I can handle strangers, but this wasn't a job site. This was family. And as the entrees came out, I understood something that some of you know too well. People don't push you out all at once. They start by moving you to the edges and hoping you'll step out on your own. Jessica didn't want me gone because I was loud. She wanted me gone because I existed. After dinner, the band started and the dance floor filled. Kyle spun Jessica around like he'd been waiting his whole life for this night. She looked perfect, expensive dress, perfect hair, perfect smile. And still, her eyes kept finding me. Not fondly, not warmly, more like I was a detail she couldn't edit out of the picture. Around 9, she broke away from the crowd and walked straight to my table. Her jaw was set like she'd rehearsed the words. "Frank," she said, "we need to talk." She led me to the terrace overlooking the golf course. Cool air, crickets, the kind of calm that makes conflict feel louder. "I think it's time for you to go," she said. I stared at her. "Excuse me? You've seen the ceremony, you've had dinner. The rest of the evening is really for our peers, our professional colleagues." I let the sentence hang, because I wanted her to hear it. "And I'm not part of that," I said. "It's not personal," she replied, which is what people say when it's deeply personal. "Kyle is transitioning into my world. Tonight matters." I looked through the glass doors. Kyle was smiling, unaware. "I want to watch my son enjoy his wedding," I said. Jessica's expression hardened, "and I want my wedding to go smoothly, without complications." I didn't move. Some of you know that kind of moment, the one where staying costs you, but leaving costs you more. She brought Kyle back like a witness, like I was the one on trial. Jessica disappeared inside. 10 minutes later, she returned with Kyle, his face tight, his eyes darting between us. "Dad," he said quietly, "Jessica thinks maybe you might want to head out early." I didn't answer him right away. I watched the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, watched the way he stood half a step closer to her than to me. "Do you think that?" I asked. Kyle swallowed. "I just want everyone to be happy." "I'm happy," I said. "Right here, watching my son." Jessica's patience snapped. "Get out of here," she said, loud. It turned heads immediately. Conversations around the terrace stuttered and stopped. People leaned, pretending not to listen while listening anyway. Kyle flinched. "Jessica, people can hear you." "Good," she snapped. "Maybe your father will finally get the message." She turned toward me, and her voice got sharper, more confident, like she was performing for the crowd. "This is supposed to be an elegant affair," she said, "and I won't have some uneducated blue-collar worker embarrassing us in front of my colleagues." Kyle's face went pale. There are insults you can shrug off, and then there are insults that redraw the entire map of a relationship. That's what she did right there, with witnesses. And that's when I understood she wasn't losing control. She was finally telling the truth. The more people watched, the braver she became. More guests drifted closer, drawn by raised voices, the way people drift toward a fender bender. I saw faces through the glass, curiosity, discomfort, judgment. Jessica gestured at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "That suit probably cost less than my shoes," she said. "He drives a pickup truck to a country club. He doesn't understand the conversations we're having in there." Someone whispered my name like it was gossip. Jessica's mother appeared behind her, looking mortified but not stopping her. That told me everything. Jessica kept going. "There's nothing wrong with blue-collar work," she said, and you could hear the lie in the softness. "But let's be honest about what it is. It's manual labor. It's not intellectual work. It's not our level." "Our level," I repeated quietly. "Yes," she said. "Kyle and I are professionals now. We have reputations to build, careers to protect. And frankly, Frank, you're a liability." Kyle finally found his voice. "Jessica, stop." She didn't, because it wasn't about me anymore. It was about her proving something to her parents, her classmates, herself. And standing there, hands in my pockets, I felt a familiar silence settle over me. Not surrender, calculation. The kind of calm you get when you realize the argument is over because the consequences are about to begin. I agreed with her because agreement can be a trap. I nodded slowly, like I was conceding. You're absolutely right, I said. Jessica blinked. She'd been gearing up for a fight. My agreement stole her momentum. I kept my voice even. I'm just a simple electrician. Very basic work. Nothing intellectual about it. Kyle stared at me, confused. He'd grown up watching me run my contracting business bids, schedules, inspections, payroll. He knew I wasn't simple. But I wasn't speaking for Kyle. Not anymore. I was speaking to the audience Jessica had gathered. And you're also right, I continued, that Kyle deserves to be with educated people. He's smart, hardworking. He belongs with professionals. Jessica's shoulders loosened. She thought she'd won. I'm glad you finally understand, she said. Oh, I understand, I replied, and I meant it in a way she couldn't hear yet. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Kyle's eyes narrowed. Dad, what are you doing? Making an adjustment, I said. A lot of people think revenge is loud. They imagine yelling, threats, broken things. But the kind that lasts, the kind that changes the future, usually sounds like a ringtone. I found the name in my contacts, Richard Steinberg. Then I hit call. The banker answered on the second ring because money gets respect fast. Frank, Richard said, voice professional but warm. Everything okay? I held the phone a little higher so anyone close could hear. Not because I wanted drama, because Jessica had already made it public. Richard, I said, I need to invoke the acceleration clause. Jessica's face changed immediately, like the air had turned thin. What clause? She demanded, but I didn't look at her. Richard hesitated. Frank, that's a significant move. How significant? I asked, loud enough for the terrace. There was a pause, a soft click as he pulled numbers. Combined principal and accrued interest, Richard said carefully. Approximately $425,000. Silence hit the terrace like a power outage. Jessica's mouth opened, but no sound came out. That's correct, I said into the phone. Both notes. Due in full within 30 days. Send the notices certified. Kyle grabbed my arm. Dad, what loans? I kept my voice calm. The ones I've been paying. Jessica shook her head hard. I don't have loans. I aid my parents. I finally looked at her. How exactly did you think Northwestern Law got paid? The question wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than shouting. Because suddenly, our level had a price tag. And everyone was hearing it. She wasn't panicking because she was guilty. She was panicking because the math was public. Jessica stammered about federal aid, about help from her parents, about how none of this made sense. So I made it simple. I opened my banking app and turned the screen toward her. A clean list of transfers, month after month. Same date, same amount. No drama, just proof. Kyle leaned in, eyes moving as if he couldn't make the numbers real. Dad, he whispered, this is hundreds of thousands. 3 years, I said. 37 months. Never missed a payment. A few guests had stepped closer now, the kind of people who pretend they're not listening while standing exactly close enough to catch every word. Jessica's voice shrank. I thought most of it was covered. I didn't argue. I just filled in the gaps the way I fill in gaps on electrical plans. Northwestern costs what it costs, I said. Your aid covered part. Your parents covered part. The rest, I covered. Kyle looked like he'd been hit, like the ground had shifted under his feet. Jessica's hands were shaking around her champagne glass. The moment wasn't loud anymore. It was heavy. And some of you know that feeling when a person realizes the story they've been telling themselves can't survive receipts. I didn't leave the country club angry. I left it certain. I ended the call and slid my phone back into my pocket like I'd just paid a bill. Jessica stared at me as if I'd pulled a weapon. Kyle looked at her, then at me, then out at the guests who now had a front row seat to their elegant affair. I straightened my tie and gave her that same quiet smile. You said you didn't want my involvement, I told her. So now you can handle your own future, all $425,000 of it. Kyle's voice cracked. Dad, please. We didn't know. I know, I said. That was the point. I walked through the lobby without hurrying, past the marble, past the staff who suddenly treated me like I mattered. Funny how quickly respect shows up when people sense consequences. Outside, my truck was cool under my hands. I sat behind the wheel and watched the lights in the clubhouse flicker behind glass. Not anger, not yet. Just adrenaline. The aftershock of finally doing what I'd avoided for years. 3 years of silent sacrifice ended with a single phone call. I drove home slow because some choices deserve time to settle. And when I stepped into my quiet house, I realized the real reckoning hadn't even started. The proof wasn't in the big payments, it was in the small sacrifices. At home, the kitchen felt like a museum of Kyle's childhood, photos on the fridge, certificates, that old table where he used to spread textbooks like he owned the world. I opened my laptop and logged into the bank portal. Both accounts were there. Active, real, numbers that didn't care about feelings. Then I opened the folder on my desktop, a plain label, K&J Education. Inside were receipts most people would have thrown away, prep courses, books, laptops, fees, deposits. The boring stuff that quietly makes someone's life possible. I hadn't kept them to punish anyone. I kept them because I run a business. Documentation is survival. My phone rang. Kyle. Dad, he said, voice raw. Please come back. Jessica's having a panic attack. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Is she? She can't breathe, he rushed. She's saying her career is over. The firm if she has collections. That was the first time I heard it. Not shame, not remorse. Fear of consequences. Kyle, I asked, did you ever wonder how you graduated debt-free? Silence. Did you ever ask where the money came from? More silence. The kind that says he knew and didn't want to know. Some of you recognize that too when people love the benefits of your sacrifices, but not the reminder that you made them. The first lesson wasn't about money, it was about who he chose when it mattered. I didn't yell at Kyle. I didn't need to. Your wife didn't just insult me, I told him. She insulted the man who made her life possible, and you stood there. Kyle's breathing caught. I was trying to keep the peace. That's a familiar excuse, I said softly. Peace usually means the weaker person stays quiet. On the other end of the line, I could hear voices: Jessica crying, her parents talking fast, guests asking questions, chaos. I looked at the payment schedule again. The neat columns, the certainty of it. 30 days. That's what contracts give you. Time. Here's what happens, I said. The debt stands. If Jessica wants to negotiate, she can call Richard Monday. Kyle swallowed. What do you want from us? I want you to understand what tonight revealed, I answered. Respect isn't optional. It's foundational. I hung up and turned off my phone. Not as punishment, as a boundary. Some of you know that weight too when you finally stop being available to people who only call when they're afraid. The next morning, Kyle came home looking like grief had slept in his clothes. Sunday at 8, he was on my porch. Same steps where we'd had hard talks before. Some places hold history like fingerprints. He sat down, exhausted. Dad, why didn't you tell me about any of it? I took a sip of coffee and watched the backyard where he used to play. The tire swing still hung from the oak tree. Because I didn't want gratitude to become a chain, I said. I wanted you to succeed without feeling owned. Kyle rubbed his face. Jessica wants to apologize. Does she? I asked, and I kept it neutral. Not bitter, just precise. He nodded quickly. She knows she was wrong. The pressure, her family. I set my cup down. Kyle, I heard what she believes. Those weren't stress words. Those were her real thoughts, spoken out loud. He opened his mouth to defend her, then stopped. Because he couldn't unhear it either. I leaned forward. What I want is truth from both of you. Kyle's eyes dropped. Truth is uncomfortable. That's why people pay so much to avoid it. The apology I asked for wasn't about pride, it was about balance. I want her to say it, I told Kyle. Out loud, publicly, the way the insult was public. Kyle's phone buzzed. He glanced down and frowned. What? I asked. He swallowed. There's video. Video? I repeated. Someone posted the terrace confrontation, he said. It's going viral. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just felt that cold satisfaction you get when reality finally refuses to be edited. Kyle read the caption aloud, voice faint. Entitled bride tells father-in-law to get out of wedding after he pays for her law school. He looked up at me, panicked. Dad, this could destroy her career before it starts. I nodded slowly. Then she should have thought of that before creating a public scandal. Kyle paced. There has to be a way to fix it. There is, I said. She apologizes. She acknowledges the truth. Then we talk about terms. Kyle called her on speaker. Her voice came through high and frantic lawyers, media, job offer in danger. When Kyle told her my condition, she said the sentence that told me everything. I can't do that, she snapped. It would be admitting I was wrong. Kyle closed his eyes. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about class. It was about a person who would rather burn her future than bend her pride. Monday morning, she tried to control the story and accidentally sealed her own case. I was reading the paper when my phone lit up with notifications, screenshots, tags, messages from people who'd been at the wedding. Jessica had posted a statement online. She framed herself as a victim, claimed manipulation, said she never asked for loans, said she was being intimidated. The comments poured in fast sympathy from strangers who didn't know the facts. But she made a mistake. She tagged people who had witnessed everything. My phone rang. Richard. Frank, he said, have you seen the post? Just did. He let out a quiet breath. It helps us. She's acknowledging the financial relationship publicly. I looked at the screen again. I could practically see the legal implications stacking like bricks. By noon, local radio picked it up. By afternoon, the story had escaped her control entirely. And the thing about public narratives is this. Once you invite the world in, you don't get to choose what they notice. They notice the contradictions. They notice the arrogance. They notice the part where someone takes help gladly and calls the helper an embarrassment. Some of you have watched people dig their own hole with confidence. That's what it sounded like. The first people to turn on her weren't trolls, they were professionals. A judge who'd been at the wedding commented publicly, calm, specific, direct. So did a doctor, so did an attorney who understood exactly what fitness and judgment meant in that world. Jessica thought her degree made her untouchable. But professionals don't respect drama. They respect consistency. Kyle called me late afternoon, voice thin. Dad, the firm is reconsidering her offer. Understandable, I said. He swallowed. And the Bar Association is asking questions about her posts, about making misleading statements. That's when Kyle sounded less like a husband and more like a man waking up. What does she want to do now? I asked. She wants to meet, he said. Tonight. I glanced at the clock. 8 o'clock. Your place or mine? Yours, Kyle said quickly. She's scared. I didn't correct him, but I thought it. She isn't scared of what she did. She's scared of what it costs. Before they arrived, I cleared my dining table and laid out 3 years of paperwork like an accountant preparing for Judgment Day. Not to humiliate her. To remove every place she could hide. When she saw the documents, she finally understood who I really was. They knocked at 8 sharp. Kyle looked exhausted. Jessica looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. No power suit, no perfect hair, just red eyes and a sweatshirt that said the name of the institution she was so proud of. Frank, she said quietly, thank you for seeing us. I gestured to the dining room. Then she stopped. The table was covered edge-to-edge promissory notes, bank statements, receipts, spreadsheets, labeled piles. Jesus, she whispered. 3 years, I said. Every penny documented. Kyle picked up a statement, eyes wide. Dad, this is incredibly detailed. I run a business, I replied. Documentation matters. Jessica sat down heavily, staring at the stacks like they were a verdict. I didn't know it was this much, she said. You knew I was helping, I answered. She swallowed. I thought, maybe a few payments? I pulled out a legal pad and a calculator and did something that changes people. I made the truth impossible to argue with. Numbers don't care how you feel about them. And that night, the numbers spoke louder than she ever had. The first real apology doesn't sound like poetry, it sounds like someone losing the last place they could hide. Jessica's tears didn't come with theatrics this time. They fell straight down onto the Northwestern logo on her sweatshirt like her body had finally stopped performing. She stared at the yellow legal pad where I'd written the totals, and the number at the bottom sat there like a judge that didn't care about excuses. Kyle's hand found hers across the table. He didn't squeeze hard, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone, not enough to save her from what she'd done. I didn't know it was this much, she whispered. You knew I was helping, I said, voice level. You just didn't want to know how much. Her throat worked, like she was swallowing glass. Frank, I'm sorry. I didn't nod. I didn't soften. For what, exactly? That's the part people skip when they want forgiveness fast, the naming, the specific truth. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. I was embarrassed, she said, and the word came out ugly because it was honest. Not because you're an electrician. Because I'm insecure. Because I was terrified people would decide I didn't belong, so I tried to erase anything that reminded them I came from somewhere ordinary. Kyle's eyes dropped to the table. That silence, some of you know it, that familiar silence when someone realizes they've been complicit just by staying quiet. Jessica looked up at me again. You didn't ask for credit. You didn't ask for a thank you. You just paid. And I punished you for it. I let that sit. The kitchen clock ticked. A faint hum from my old refrigerator filled the gap, one of those appliances I'd kept too long because tuition came first. What do you want? She asked, voice raw. I want balance, I said. The insult was public, so the apology has to be public. Kyle inhaled sharply. Jessica flinched like I'd slapped her. Public? She repeated. Yes, I said. And one more thing. I tapped the folder near my elbow. No more stories, no more spin. We tell the truth out loud, or we let the paperwork tell it for us. And in her eyes, I saw the next fight lining up pride versus survival. 2 weeks later, they tried to redo the wedding like you can rewind a moment that already went viral. I heard about the fresh start the way you hear about weather in a small town before it arrives, from 3 different people who don't even know each other. Street Matthews Lutheran. 50 guests, cake and coffee in the basement. Simple, quiet, a do-over designed to look humble. I wasn't invited. That told me everything. Because a fresh start without accountability isn't a fresh start. It's a cover-up with better lighting. So I loaded my banker's box into the truck anyway. The same box I'd carried to my dining room table: notes, receipts, bank statements, the kind of boring evidence that becomes terrifying when you've been lying to yourself. Cardboard corners worn soft from being set down and picked up again, like I'd been practicing for a courtroom I never wanted. I parked across from the church at 2:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the ceremony, and sat on the front steps with the box beside me. The stone was cold through my slacks. The air smelled like cut grass and old hymnals. Somewhere inside, an organ warmed up with a few tentative notes hesitating like it knew. Guests arrived in small groups, slowing when they saw me. Confused faces, curious faces, people trying to decide whether to smile or pretend they didn't recognize me from the video. Then Dr. and Mrs. Miller pulled into the lot. They stopped like they'd hit an invisible wall. Frank, Dr. Miller said, careful. What are you doing here? I didn't stand up yet. I just rested my palm on the lid of the box, waiting. For what? Mrs. Miller asked, voice tight. For someone to ask the right question, I said. More guests arrived. Kyle's co-workers, Tony and his wife. A couple of Jessica's law school friends who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I watched them glance at the box, then away. You may recognize that feeling, too, the moment when the room starts to realize there's more to the story than the version they were handed. At exactly 3 p.m., the church doors opened. Kyle stepped out first, pale, eyes already pleading. Dad, you can't be here. I finally stood. and the steps seemed smaller than they had a second ago. Then tell her to stop fighting the truth, I said, because I didn't come here to ruin a wedding. I nodded toward the box. I came here to stop a lie from becoming a marriage. On those church steps, my son didn't just apologize, he chose what kind of man he was going to be. Jessica appeared in a simple white dress, nothing like the country club gown, but the posture was the same, chin up, eyes sharp, trying to control the scene before it could control her. The moment she saw me, her face hardened. "Kyle," she snapped, "get away from him. Now." Kyle didn't move. He looked at the box, then at her, like he was seeing the whole path that led here. "Jessica," he said, voice low, "we need to talk about the attorney letter." Her eyes flashed. "We need to get married. That's what we need to do." I lifted a manila folder from the box. The paper inside was crisp, my name printed at the top like a challenge. "Your lawyer thinks you can call this coercion," I said calmly. "After you signed it, after you cashed it, after you called me uneducated in public." A crowd gathered faster than any invitation list could control. People stepped out of cars, phones came up, whispered names, Judge Martinez, Doctor, Peterson faces from the first wedding, witnesses who didn't forget what they heard. Jessica's attorney pushed forward, breathless. "Mr. McKenna, you need to stop this public display." Judge Martinez's voice cut clean through the air. "If your client made it public, it can be discussed in public." I opened the box and laid the documents on the steps in neat stacks, promissory notes with notarized stamps, monthly transfer histories, receipts for bar prep and books. Boring, deadly, real. A corner of paper lifted in the wind and slapped softly against stone, like the truth tapping impatiently. Jessica's attorney started talking about inherent pressure and family dynamics. The judge didn't blink. "These are extraordinarily generous terms," she said. "And your client is a law graduate." She understood what she signed. Jessica's shoulders shook. "He's trying to destroy me." Kyle stepped forward one step that felt like a door closing behind him. "No," he said, louder now. "We did this. We took everything and acted like it came from the air." He turned to the guests' 50 faces waiting for a script. "My father paid for both of our educations," he said. "And 2 weeks ago, we treated him like he didn't belong." That's a familiar silence, the kind that comes right before life changes direction. Kyle looked at me. "Dad, I'm sorry." I shook his hand. Not a hug, a handshake. Because adulthood isn't comfort, it's accountability. Then I looked at Jessica. "Drop the challenge," I said. "Apologize publicly. Tell the truth. Then we talk new terms." She opened her mouth, and for a second, I saw the choice forming. Pride or peace. And if you've ever watched someone stand at that edge, you know the next word decides everything. If this story pulled something up in you, tell me, what would you have done if you were Kyle on those steps? And if you know someone carrying that quiet weight, share this with them. Sometimes one honest conversation saves a future. Because second chances aren't free. They're earned.